The last rays of sunlight cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Willow Creek, as Olivia Bennett clutched her valise tightly, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. It was 1878, and the small Colorado mining town looked nothing like the promising frontier settlement described in the newspaper advertisement that had lured her west from Boston. Exhaustion tugged at her bones after days of jolting stagecoach travel, but determination kept her standing tall despite the curious stares from townspeople unaccustomed to seeing a refined Eastern lady alone on their streets. 3 months ago, she had been Mrs. Olivia Harrington, wife of a respected Boston banker. Now she was a widow with nothing but painful memories, a modest inheritance, and a desperate need to escape a city where every street corner, every parlor, every familiar face reminded her of all she had lost. At 26, Olivia had never imagined starting over, but grief had a way of reshaping one's entire existence. "Madam, you look a mite lost." The deep voice startled her from her thoughts. Olivia turned to find herself facing a tall man whose weathered face suggested he spent most of his days under the open sky. His dark brown Stetson was pushed back on his head, revealing striking blue eyes that assessed her with equal parts curiosity and concern. "I'm looking for Mrs. Abernathy's boarding house," she replied, striving to keep her voice steady. "I've arranged to stay there while I establish myself in town." The stranger nodded, a half-smile warming his features. "You've nearly walked past it. It's that white 2-story building with the blue trim just there." He pointed to a neat structure about 50 yards ahead. "Name's Vaughn Blackwood, by the way. I run the Double B Ranch outside of town." "Olivia Bennett. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Blackwood. Just Vaughn, madam. Everybody calls me Vaughn." He tipped his hat. "Welcome to Willow Creek. Mind if I ask what brings you all the way out here? We don't get many Eastern ladies arriving on their own." Olivia hesitated, not ready to share her story with a stranger, no matter how kind he appeared. "A fresh start, Mr. Blackwood, nothing more complicated than that." Something in her tone must have communicated her desire for privacy, because he simply nodded. "Well, Mrs. Abernathy sets a fine table and she doesn't tolerate any foolishness in her establishment. You'll be in good hands there." He reached for her valise. "Let me help you with that." "That's not necessary," Olivia began, but he had already taken the heavy bag from her grasp. "It's no trouble, madam. Besides, it wouldn't be proper to let a lady struggle with such a burden when I'm standing right here with 2 good arms." As they walked the short distance to the boarding house, Olivia became acutely aware of the curious glances from passers-by. Willow Creek was clearly the type of place where newcomers were noted and discussed. "Don't mind the staring," Vaughn said, seeming to read her thoughts. "News travels fast here, and a new face is the most exciting thing to happen since old Pete Jenkins struck a small silver vein last month." Mrs. Abernathy proved to be a stout, gray-haired woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a no-nonsense manner that Olivia found reassuring. After Vaughn deposited her valise in the entryway and departed with another tip of his hat, the older woman showed Olivia to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. "Supper's at 6 sharp," Mrs. Abernathy informed her. "Bathrooms down the hall. You share it with Miss Prescott, the schoolteacher, and Mrs. Holloway, a widow like yourself. Both are respectable ladies." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I don't recall mentioning that I was a widow." Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened slightly. "You're wearing a black armband, dear, and there's no ring on your finger. It wasn't hard to figure out. That and Mr. Blackwood mentioned you were looking for a fresh start when he wrote to secure your room." "Mr. Blackwood wrote to you about me, of course." "He's the one who placed the advertisement you responded to. Didn't he mention that?" Olivia felt a surge of confusion. "No, he certainly did not. We've only just met on the street outside." Mrs. Abernathy's brows drew together. "Well, that's peculiar." "He received several inquiries about the position, but he said your letter stood out. Something about your penmanship and the way you expressed yourself, as I recall." "What position?" Olivia asked, her voice rising slightly. I responded to an advertisement for homesteading opportunities in Willow Creek. There was no mention of a position. The older woman looked genuinely perplexed now. The advertisement was for a schoolteacher for the children at Willow Creek and the surrounding ranches. Our last teacher, Miss Thompson, left to get married 2 months ago. Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of the situation. There must be some mistake. I have no training as a teacher. I came here to purchase land and make a new life for myself. Mrs. Abernathy patted her shoulder sympathetically. Well, dear, there's been a misunderstanding somewhere along the line, but don't fret about it tonight. Get some rest, have a good meal, and things will look clearer in the morning. After the landlady departed, Olivia unpacked her few belongings and splashed water on her face from the basin. The reflection that stared back at her from the small mirror looked tired but resolute. She had come too far to turn back now. If she couldn't find land to purchase, she would need to consider other options. But first, she needed to have a frank conversation with Mr. Vaughn Blackwood about exactly what game he was playing. Morning dawned bright and clear, with the kind of crystalline light that seemed unique to the mountains. Olivia had slept better than expected in the unfamiliar bed, though her dreams had been a confused jumble of train journeys, her late husband's face, and inexplicably, the blue eyes of the rancher she'd met the previous day. She dressed carefully in one of her simpler dresses, a navy blue cotton with white trim that was practical while still maintaining some Eastern refinement. After a substantial breakfast shared with the other boarders, including the friendly schoolteacher, Miss Prescott, who seemed blissfully unaware that someone might have been hired to replace her, Olivia set out to locate Vaughn Blackwood. She found him outside the general store, deep in conversation with an older man whose formal attire marked him as someone of importance in the small community. When Vaughn caught sight of her approaching with determined strides, something like alarm flashed across his face. "Mr. Blackwood," she said crisply, "I believe we need to discuss the advertisement that brought me to Willow Creek." The older gentleman looked between them with interest. "This must be the lady from Boston you mentioned, Vaughn." "Indeed it is. Mayor Patterson, may I present Mrs. Olivia Bennett?" "Mrs. Bennett, this is Mayor William Patterson." The mayor tipped his hat. "A pleasure, madam. Vaughn here has been singing your praises since he received your letter. We're mighty pleased to have someone of your caliber taking an interest in our little town." Olivia maintained her polite smile with effort. "Thank you, Mayor Patterson. However, I believe there's been some confusion regarding my purpose here." She turned her gaze to Vaughn. "Perhaps Mr. Blackwood could spare a few minutes to clarify matters," the mayor chuckled. "I'll leave you two to sort out the details. Mrs. Bennett, I hope you'll join my wife and me for dinner soon. We're always eager to welcome new residents, especially those bringing education and culture to our community." As the mayor walked away, Olivia fixed Vaughn with a stern look. "Would you care to explain why Mrs. Abernathy believes I've come here to be a schoolteacher, and why the mayor seems to think the same?" Vaughn had the grace to look embarrassed. "I can explain everything, Mrs. Bennett, but not here in the middle of the street. Would you walk with me?" Against her better judgment, Olivia agreed. They strolled toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open countryside with a spectacular view of the mountains rising in the distance. "I did place an advertisement in several Eastern newspapers," Vaughn began. "But it wasn't exactly as Mrs. Abernathy described." "Go on," Olivia prompted when he paused. "Willow Creek is growing. The silver mines are producing well, and more families are settling here every month. We desperately need a proper school, not just lessons in the back of the church when the circuit preacher isn't using it." "And what does this have to do with me?" "Your letter in response to my advertisement was different from the others. Most people wrote about the land, about farming opportunities or business prospects. But you wrote about building something new, about creating a legacy that would mean something. You mentioned your late husband's belief in education as the foundation of civilization." Olivia remembered those words. She had written them in a moment of reflection, thinking about how Edward had always supported libraries and schools in Boston. "So you decided I should be a teacher based on a few philosophical musings in a letter?" Vaughn stopped walking and turned to face her directly. "No, madam. I decided you might be the kind of person who could help us build something important here. The town council has set aside funds to establish a proper school, but we need someone with vision to make it happen, someone who understands the value of education and has the refinement to bring a bit of civilization to a rough frontier town. Mr. Blackwood, I have no experience in education. I've never taught a day in my life. But you're educated yourself. That's plain from your letter and the way you speak, and Miss Prescott would stay on as the teacher. What we need is someone to establish the school itself, to help plan the building, order supplies, create a proper curriculum." Olivia was momentarily speechless. The idea was so far from what she had envisioned for her new life that she hardly knew how to respond. "I came west to purchase land," she said finally, "to build a home and perhaps start a small business. I have some funds from my husband's estate, and there's land available," Vaughn interrupted. "Good land, including a nice parcel not far from town that would be perfect for building a home. The school position comes with a salary that would supplement whatever means you brought with you. And once the school is established, you'd be free to pursue other interests." Olivia shook her head, trying to sort through her thoughts. "This is not at all what I expected. I know, and I apologize for the confusion, but will you at least consider it? The town meeting is tomorrow evening. Come and hear what folks have to say about the school. Meet some of the families whose children would benefit. After that, if you're still set on doing something else, I'll personally help you find the right piece of land." His earnestness was hard to resist, and Olivia found herself nodding slowly. "I'll attend the meeting, but I make no promises beyond that." Relief washed over his features. "That's all I ask. Thank you, Mrs. Bennett." As they walked back toward town, Olivia found herself studying Vaughn more carefully. He was older than she had initially thought, perhaps in his mid-30s, with laugh lines around his eyes and streaks of silver beginning to show at his temples. His hands were those of a working man, calloused and strong, but he spoke with an education and refinement that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "You're more than just a rancher, aren't you, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked suddenly. He gave her a sideways glance, a half-smile playing at his lips. "What makes you say that? You speak like an educated man. Your interest in establishing a proper school seems unusually fervent for a cattleman, and you went to considerable trouble to place advertisements in Eastern newspapers." "Let's just say I understand the value of learning," he replied. "My father insisted I attend university back east before returning to run the ranch. It seemed like a waste of time then, but I've come to appreciate what it gave me." "And what was that?" "Perspective, Mrs. Bennett. The understanding that there's more to building a community than just erecting buildings and marking property lines. It takes people with vision, people like you." Olivia wasn't sure whether to be flattered or irritated by his presumption. "You know very little about me, Mr. Blackwood. I know you had the courage to travel alone across the country to start anew after losing your husband. That tells me quite a bit about your character." They had reached the boarding house, and Olivia paused at the steps. "The town meeting is tomorrow evening, you said." 7 o'clock at the church. I'll come by to escort you if that's acceptable." She nodded, still uncertain about this unexpected turn of events but curious despite herself. "Until tomorrow then, Mr. Blackwood." "Vaughn," he corrected gently. "If you're going to be part of our community, you might as well use my given name." "That remains to be seen," she replied, but there was less sharpness in her tone than she had intended. As she watched him walk away, Olivia realized that for the first time since Edward's death, she felt something other than grief and uncertainty. She felt intrigued, and that, in itself, was something of a miracle. The town meeting proved to be a lively affair, with what seemed like every resident of Willow Creek packed into the small white clapboard church. Olivia sat in the front row beside Vaughn, acutely aware of the curious glances directed her way. Mayor Patterson presided over the proceedings, addressing various town matters before turning to what was clearly the main event of the evening: the proposed school. As you all know, we've been setting aside funds for a proper schoolhouse for some time now, the mayor announced. Thanks to the silver strike at the Lucky Star Mine and the generosity of several of our leading citizens, here he nodded toward Vaughn and a few others, we now have sufficient resources to move forward. What we need is someone with the knowledge and refinement to guide this project, to ensure our children receive an education comparable to what they might get back east. The mayor's gaze settled on Olivia. Mrs. Bennett has come to us from Boston, where she was connected with some of the finest educational institutions in the country. Olivia stiffened, startled by this exaggeration. She had mentioned in her letter that her late husband had supported Boston's public schools, but she had made no claims about her own involvement. Before she could correct this misunderstanding, a woman's voice called out from the crowd. "Why do we need some fancy Eastern lady telling us how to teach our children? Miss Prescott has been doing just fine." "Now, Mrs. Miller," the mayor began, but he was interrupted by Miss Prescott herself, who stood up from her seat several rows back. "If I may speak, Mayor Patterson." The young schoolteacher's voice was soft but clear. "I have the greatest respect for my position, but I'm the first to admit the limitations of my training. I attended a normal school for just 1 year before coming west. Our children deserve better than what I alone can provide." Another voice joined the discussion, this one belonging to a bearded man in dusty work clothes. "My boys need to learn ranching and mining, not poetry and such frippery." "And who says they can't learn both, Pete Jenkins?" This came from an elegantly dressed older woman near the back. "My grandson will inherit my shipping business someday, and he'll need proper schooling to manage it. I won't have him growing up ignorant of the wider world just because he was raised in Colorado." The debate continued, with various townspeople expressing either enthusiasm or skepticism about expanding their modest educational offerings. Olivia listened intently, noting the genuine concern for their children's futures that underlay even the most resistant comments. Finally, the mayor raised his hands for silence. "Mrs. Bennett, would you care to address the gathering? Perhaps hearing directly from you would help clarify matters." Olivia had not expected to be called upon to speak, but she rose with the poise that had been instilled in her since childhood. She took a deep breath, knowing that what she said next would either open a door to a new possibility or close it forever. "Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by correcting a misunderstanding. I did not come to Willow Creek with the intention of establishing a school. I came seeking a fresh start after the loss of my husband last year." A murmur ran through the crowd, and she saw Vaughn shift uncomfortably beside her. "However," she continued, "since arriving, I've had the opportunity to learn about your community's aspirations for education, and I find myself intrigued by the possibility of contributing to such a worthy endeavor." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I am not a trained teacher like Miss Prescott, but I was fortunate to receive an excellent education at a private academy in Boston. My late husband was a banker who believed strongly in the power of education to transform lives and build communities. He served on the board of several educational institutions and often discussed with me the principles of sound educational administration. This was stretching the truth. Somewhat. Edward had indeed supported schools, but their discussions had been casual rather than professional. Still, Olivia had read extensively on educational philosophy during their marriage, finding the subject fascinating. "I believe that education should be both practical and enlightening," she continued. "Children in Willow Creek should certainly learn the skills they need for life in this region: mathematics for business and ranching, natural sciences for understanding the land and its resources. But they should also be exposed to literature, history, and the arts, which expand the mind and nurture the soul." She looked around the room, meeting the gazes of parents and community leaders. I cannot promise to transform your educational system overnight. What I can offer is my commitment to working with Miss Prescott and all of you to build something that serves the specific needs of your community while opening doors of opportunity for your children. When she finished speaking, there was a moment of silence before the elegant older woman who had spoken earlier rose to her feet. I'm Victoria Harrington, owner of Harrington Freight. My late husband started moving goods through these mountains before there was even a proper town here. I've watched Willow Creek grow from a mining camp to a community, and I've always believed that the mark of a true community is how it educates its young. She looked directly at Olivia. Mrs. Bennett, if you're willing to take on this challenge, you have my full support, financial and otherwise. One by one, other influential citizens stood to express similar sentiments, until the mayor called for a formal vote. The result was not unanimous, but a clear majority supported moving forward with the school project with Olivia's guidance. As the meeting dispersed, Olivia found herself surrounded by well-wishers and curious townspeople eager to introduce themselves. She caught glimpses of Vaughn speaking with various men, occasionally glancing her way with what appeared to be satisfaction. When the crowd finally thinned, he made his way to her side. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "You won them over completely." "Not all of them," she replied, thinking of the several dissenters who had voted against the proposal. "You won over enough. And the rest will come around when they see what you accomplish." He offered his arm. "May I walk you back to the boarding house? It's getting late." The night air was cool and refreshing after the stuffiness of the crowded church. Stars blazed overhead in a way Olivia had never witnessed in Boston, their brilliance undiminished by city lights. "I haven't actually agreed to take the position yet," she said as they walked. "You orchestrated quite a performance tonight, Mr. Blackwood." "Vaughn," he reminded her. "And I merely provided an opportunity for you to consider a possibility you hadn't anticipated. The decision is entirely yours." Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why me?" There must be dozens of qualified teachers who would have responded to a straightforward advertisement for a school administrator. In the moonlight, his expression was difficult to read, but his voice was earnest. "Because this town doesn't need just another teacher. It needs someone with heart, someone who understands that education is about more than reciting facts. Your letter spoke of legacy, of building something meaningful after suffering a great loss. That resonated with me." "You've suffered loss yourself," Olivia observed, the realization coming to her suddenly. Vaughn was quiet for a moment. "My wife died in childbirth 6 years ago along with our infant son. I know something about starting over." The simple statement, delivered without self-pity, touched Olivia deeply. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pried." "You didn't, and it's not a secret everyone in town knows. I'm only telling you so you understand that I recognize the courage it takes to begin again in a new place." They resumed walking, and Olivia found herself reconsidering the events of the past 2 days. The idea of helping to establish a school was so far from what she had envisioned, and yet it appealed to her in unexpected ways. It would give her a purpose, a role in the community, while still allowing her to build the independent life she sought. "If I were to accept this position," she said slowly, "I would still want to purchase land and build my own home. I don't intend to live in a boarding house indefinitely." "Of course. As I mentioned, there's suitable land available not far from town. I'd be happy to show it to you tomorrow if you'd like." They had reached the boarding house and Olivia paused at the foot of the steps. "Yes, I would like that, and I believe I will accept the position, at least provisionally. Let's say for 1 year, after which we can all reassess whether the arrangement is working." The smile that spread across Vaughn's face made him look younger, almost boyish. "You won't regret it, Mrs. Bennett." "Olivia," she corrected, surprising herself with the gesture of familiarity. "If I'm to be part of this community, you might as well use my given name." His smile widened. Olivia, then, I'll come for you at 10 tomorrow morning to show you the land. Sleep well. As she prepared for bed that night, Olivia reflected on the strange turns her journey had taken. She had come west seeking solitude and independence, a place to heal from her loss away from painful reminders. Instead, she found herself committing to a community project, accepting a public role that would connect her to dozens of families. And then there was Vaughn Blackwood, with his unexpected depth and his own history of grief. She had not come to Willow Creek looking for friendship, let alone anything more complicated. Yet she couldn't deny a certain warmth in his presence, a sense of being truly seen in a way she hadn't experienced since Edward's death. "One step at a time," she murmured to herself as she extinguished the lamp. Tomorrow she would see the land. Tomorrow she would begin planning her new life, a different life than she had imagined, but perhaps a richer one. The land that Vaughn showed her the next morning exceeded her expectations. 5 acres of gently sloping terrain with a small creek running along one boundary, situated just a 15-minute ride from town. A stand of aspen trees provided natural beauty and the promise of shade in summer, while the open areas offered views of the mountains that took Olivia's breath away. "The soil is good," Vaughn explained as they walked the property. "You could have a sizable garden if you wished, and there's enough grazing land for a cow or two, some chickens, whatever livestock you might want." Olivia tried to envision a house nestled among the aspens, something modest but well-built, with a porch where she could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset paint the mountains in golden light. "It's perfect," she said softly. "How much is the owner asking?" Vaughn looked slightly uncomfortable. "Well, that's the thing, I own it." Olivia turned to him in surprise. But you said—" "I said there was suitable land available, which is true. I didn't specify who owned it." He hastened to add, "But I'm offering it at a fair price below market value, actually. I purchased several parcels in this area years ago, anticipating that the town would expand in this direction." Olivia frowned, suddenly wary. "Mr. Blackwood, Vaughn," he corrected automatically. "Vaughn, then. I hope you're not offering charity. I have sufficient means to pay a fair price." "It's not charity. It's good business. The town is growing, and having a respected citizen like yourself build here will only increase the value of my other holdings nearby." He named a figure that, while indeed reasonable, was substantial enough to respect her dignity. "I'll need to think about it," Olivia said, though in truth she had already made up her mind. This land called to her in a way she couldn't quite explain. "Of course. There's no rush." Vaughn helped her back onto her borrowed horse, a gentle mare from the livery stable. "In the meantime, shall we discuss plans for the school? The town council has already purchased land on Oak Street for the building." They spent the ride back to town talking about educational philosophy and practical considerations for the schoolhouse design. Vaughn revealed that his university education had included architecture, though he had never practiced professionally. "I've sketched some ideas for the building," he admitted. "Nothing elaborate but functional and designed to expand as the town grows." By the time they returned to Willow Creek, they had outlined a rough plan. Olivia would work with Miss Prescott on developing a curriculum while Vaughn consulted with the town's carpenter on the building design. Construction would begin within the month, with hopes of opening the school by autumn. As for Olivia's own home, she decided by the end of the day to purchase Vaughn's land. The legal transaction was completed the following week, and planning began immediately. Olivia threw herself into both projects, the school and her house, with an energy that surprised her. For months after Edward's death, she had moved through life in a fog of grief, doing only what was necessary to maintain appearances. Now, she found herself genuinely excited about each day's tasks. Miss Prescott Rebecca, as Olivia now called her, proved to be a valuable partner in the educational enterprise. Though young and somewhat limited in formal training, she possessed a natural gift for teaching and a genuine love for her pupils. "The children here are different from what you might be used to," Rebecca explained as they cataloged the meager collection of books that constituted the town's educational resources. Some have never attended school at all. Others have had sporadic instruction, depending on their family's circumstances. Many of the ranch children can only attend during the winter months when they're not needed for work. Then we must make the most of whatever time we have with them, Olivia replied. And perhaps find ways to provide materials for home study during their absences. Summer progressed, with construction on both the schoolhouse and Olivia's home moving forward steadily. She visited her property frequently, watching with satisfaction as the walls rose and her vision took shape. Vaughn often accompanied her, offering suggestions based on his architectural knowledge and practical experience with local building methods. On one such visit in late July, they paused to rest in the shade of the aspens, sharing a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and apples. "You seem different," Vaughn observed, studying her face. "From when you first arrived, I mean," Olivia considered this. "I suppose I feel purposeful again. After Edward died, I existed rather than lived. There was no joy in anything. And now." She gestured toward the half-built house and the mountains beyond. "Now I find myself looking forward to tomorrow. The school, this house, they give me something to build toward. I'm glad," he said simply. Then, after a moment, "Tell me about him, your husband." The request surprised her, but Olivia found she didn't mind. Edward was kind, intelligent, steady. We had a good marriage, not passionate in the way romantic novels describe, but comfortable and respectful. He was 20 years my senior, a friend of my father's originally. An arranged marriage. Vaughn asked, careful to keep any judgment from his tone. "Not exactly arranged, but certainly approved and encouraged. My parents died when I was 20, and Edward had been a support to me through that difficulty. When he proposed a year later, it seemed natural to accept." Olivia smiled at the memory. "He was good to me. We shared interests in books and music. He encouraged my mind in a way many husbands might not have. He sounds like an honorable man." "He was." Olivia turned the conversation. "And your wife, would you tell me about her?" Vaughn's expression softened. "Margaret was full of life, always laughing, always in motion. We were childhood sweethearts, grew up on neighboring ranches. She could ride and shoot as well as any man, but she also loved beautiful things, flowers, pretty dresses, poetry. You must miss her terribly." "Every day, but not in the same raw way as at first. Now I can remember the happiness without being consumed by the loss." He looked at Olivia directly. "It does get better, though I know it might not seem possible now." "It's already better," she admitted. "Being here, starting fresh, it helps." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the rustle of aspen leaves and the gentle gurgle of the creek. Olivia was struck by how comfortable she felt in Vaughn's presence, how easy it was to share thoughts she had kept private for so long. As summer gave way to autumn, both construction projects neared completion. The schoolhouse, a sturdy, well-designed building with large windows to admit plenty of light, was finished first, with a grand opening ceremony attended by the entire town. Olivia stood proudly beside Rebecca and Mayor Patterson as the ribbon was cut, feeling a sense of accomplishment that warmed her from within. Her own house was completed just as the first snowflakes began to fall in early November. It was everything she had envisioned: a comfortable two-bedroom home with a spacious kitchen, a cozy parlor featuring a stone fireplace, and a wide porch wrapping around two sides. The carpenter had incorporated several of Vaughn's design suggestions, including built-in bookshelves and a clever system of indoor plumbing that drew water from the creek. Moving day was a community affair, with several townspeople arriving to help transport Olivia's belongings from the boarding house to her new home. Vaughn brought a housewarming gift, a rocking chair he had made himself, the wood polished to a soft gleam. "It's beautiful," Olivia exclaimed, running her hand along the smooth armrest. "I didn't know you were a woodworker as well." "Just a hobby," he replied modestly. "My grandfather taught me when I was a boy. I find it relaxing." That evening, after everyone had departed, Olivia sat in her new rocking chair before the fire, enjoying the profound satisfaction of being in her own home. The school was thriving, with 28 pupils attending regularly and more expected after the winter. She had made friends among the townspeople, particularly Victoria Harrington, the freight company owner who had supported her at the town meeting. Yet despite these connections, there were moments like this one when solitude pressed in around her. The house, for all its charm, felt very quiet with just one person in it. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Vaughn standing on her porch, snowflakes dusting his broad shoulders. "I apologize for calling so late," he said. "I was riding past and saw your light. I wanted to make sure everything was in order with the house, now that you've had a few hours to settle in." Olivia knew this was a transparent excuse. His ranch lay in the opposite direction, but she found herself pleased by his presence. "Everything is perfect," she assured him. "Won't you come in for some tea, or I have coffee if you prefer?" They sat before the fire, talking easily about the school, the approaching winter, local gossip about who was courting whom in town. When the conversation lulled, Vaughn leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "Olivia, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. A proposal of sorts." Her heart gave an unexpected lurch. Surely he wasn't about to. They had known each other only a few months, and while she valued his friendship immensely, she wasn't ready for anything more. Seeing her expression, Vaughn quickly clarified. "A business proposal, about the land surrounding your property." Relief and surprisingly a touch of disappointment washed through her. "What about it?" "I still own the adjacent 20 acres. I've been thinking about what to do with it, and I have an idea that might interest you." He paused. "What would you think about establishing an orchard?" "An orchard?" Olivia repeated, intrigued despite herself. "Apple trees primarily, but also pears, perhaps some cherries. The soil and climate are well suited, according to the agricultural bulletins I've read. There's nothing like it in this region. The nearest commercial orchards are 100 miles away. With the railroad connection now, we could ship fruit to Denver and beyond." "We?" Olivia queried, noting the pronoun. "I'm proposing a partnership. I provide the land and the initial investment for trees and equipment. You manage the operation, hiring workers, overseeing the planting and eventually the harvesting and shipping. We share the profits equally." Olivia sat back, genuinely surprised by the proposal. "Why me? I know nothing about growing fruit trees." "You're organized, intelligent, and not afraid of hard work. The technical aspects can be learned. I have books on the subject, and there's a retired orchardist in Denver who's agreed to consult. The school position only occupies you part-time, and an orchard would complement that schedule perfectly. The busiest times would be when school is not in session." The idea was appealing. Olivia had enjoyed her small garden in Boston and had already planned a larger one here. An orchard would be a natural extension of that interest, while providing additional income and a deeper connection to the land. "I would need time to consider this carefully," she said. "It's a significant commitment, of course. There's no rush. The best time for planting would be spring anyway." Vaughn stood to leave. "Think about it, and in the meantime I have some books on fruit cultivation you might find interesting." After he departed, Olivia returned to her rocking chair, her mind whirling with possibilities. An orchard, a business partnership. A new direction she had never considered. And beneath these practical considerations, a growing awareness of Vaughn himself, his intelligence, his kindness, the way his presence made her home feel less empty. She wasn't ready to name these feelings, barely ready to acknowledge them even to herself. But they were there, taking root like saplings in fertile soil. Winter settled over Willow Creek with a series of heavy snowstorms that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland. The school remained open despite the weather, with most children arriving on sleds or snowshoes. Olivia found that she enjoyed teaching more than she had anticipated, particularly the advanced reading group, where she could share her love of literature. Vaughn brought the promised books on orchard management, and Olivia spent her evenings studying the cultivation of fruit trees with growing enthusiasm. By January, she had drafted a business plan that expanded on Vaughn's initial proposal, including detailed projections for costs, labor requirements, and potential profits. "This is impressive," he said when she presented it to him over dinner at her home. She had begun inviting him for meals once or twice a week, a practice that felt both natural and slightly daring. "You've thought of considerations that hadn't even occurred to me. If we're to be partners, I want to contribute more than just labor," Olivia replied. "I may not know much about agriculture yet, but I understand business principles. Edward taught me a great deal about financial management. It appears he taught you well." Vaughn studied one page of calculations. "With these projections, we could expect to see our first modest profit in 3 years, with significant returns beginning in year 5 or 6. Assuming average yields and stable prices, yes, I've tried to be conservative in my estimates." They spent the evening refining the plan, their heads bent together over the papers spread across Olivia's dining table. The collaboration felt natural, their different perspectives and skills complementing each other perfectly. As winter progressed, they fell into a comfortable routine. School during the day, planning for the orchard in the evenings. Sundays often found them attending church together, followed by dinner at Olivia's house or occasionally at the hotel restaurant for a special treat. They were not courting, at least, neither had put such a name to their relationship, but the people of Willow Creek had begun to regard them as a pair. Invitations arrived addressed to them both. Friends and acquaintances made remarks that hinted at expectations of a more formal announcement eventually. Olivia found herself both alarmed and intrigued by these assumptions. She had not come west seeking romance, had believed that chapter of her life concluded with Edward's death. Yet she could not deny the quickening of her pulse when Vaughn arrived at her door, the pleasure she took in his company, the way her thoughts turned to him at odd moments throughout the day. One evening in early March, as they sat before her fire discussing the varieties of apple trees they would order, Vaughn suddenly set aside his notes and turned to face her directly. "Olivia, there's something I need to say." The serious tone of his voice made her stomach tighten with apprehension. "What is it?" "I've been dishonest with you, or at least, not entirely forthcoming." She set down her teacup carefully. "About what?" "About my background." He took a deep breath. "I didn't attend just any university back east. I studied at Harvard, where I earned degrees in both architecture and business. My father wasn't just a rancher, he was one of the largest landowners in Colorado Territory, with interests in mining and the railroad as well as cattle." Olivia stared at him, processing this revelation. "Why would you keep this secret?" "When I returned to Colorado after my education, I wanted to make my own way, separate from my father's influence. I built the Double B from a small property I purchased myself without his help. And after Margaret died," he paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "After I lost her and our son, I withdrew from the social circles I'd been part of. I preferred the simplicity of being known as just another rancher." "But you're not just another rancher," Olivia said slowly. "The school, the orchard proposal, these aren't the projects of a simple cattleman. No, they're not. They reflect my true interests and education." His eyes held hers steadily. "Just as they reflect yours. That's why your letter caught my attention so strongly. You wrote about creating something meaningful, about building rather than merely existing. Those words resonated because they expressed exactly what I've been trying to do since my loss." Olivia absorbed this, remembering phrases from her letter that she had written in a moment of vulnerability, never expecting them to be so carefully read or deeply understood. "Is that why you've spent so much time with me? Because of some philosophical alignment?" "It started that way," Vaughn admitted, "but it's become much more." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Olivia, I care for you deeply, more than I ever expected to care for anyone again after Margaret." The declaration hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Olivia's heart raced, fear and joy battling within her. "I don't expect you to return these feelings," he continued when she remained silent. "I know you're still healing from your own loss. I just wanted you to understand why I've been drawn to you from the beginning, not just your intelligence or your courage in coming west alone, but the spirit behind those qualities. The essence of who you are." Olivia found her voice at last. "I care for you too, Vaughn, but I'm afraid. I came here to build an independent life, to find strength in standing alone. If I allow myself to care too much, to lean on someone else again. It's not leaning to share your life with someone who respects your strength," he said softly. "Partnership doesn't diminish independence, it enhances it, giving both people the freedom to pursue their individual passions while knowing they have support when needed." His words touched something deep within her, a longing she had tried to ignore, a need not for rescue but for genuine companionship. "I'm not asking for any declarations or commitments," Vaughn assured her. "Only honesty between us about what we're feeling and permission to court you properly if you're willing." Olivia looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the patience and understanding. "I am willing," she said finally, "but slowly, Vaughn, one step at a time." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "One step at a time," he agreed, raising her hand to his lips in a gesture that was both respectful and full of promise. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers covering the meadows and the first tender green leaves appearing on the aspens. Work on the orchard began in earnest, with Vaughn hiring a crew to prepare the soil while Olivia corresponded with nurseries about tree stock. They ordered 500 saplings of various varieties, primarily apples, but also pears, cherries, and a small experimental plot of peaches. Their courtship progressed with the same deliberate care they gave to the orchard planning. Vaughn brought small, thoughtful gifts books he thought she would enjoy, wildflower bouquets gathered during his rides, a handcrafted wooden box for her desk. They took Sunday afternoon rides through the countryside, picnicked by the creek, and attended the occasional social events in town together. The first kiss came on an April evening as they stood on her porch after returning from such an event, a dance at the newly completed town hall. It was gentle, questioning, a communion of two people who had known loss and were cautiously embracing the possibility of new happiness. When they parted, Olivia saw in Vaughn's eyes the same wonder she felt, that life could offer second chances, that hearts could heal and reopen. The school term ended in May, freeing Olivia to devote herself fully to the orchard project. The saplings arrived on a special freight wagon, their roots carefully wrapped in damp burlap. Planting was a community event, with neighbors coming to help set the delicate young trees into the prepared soil. By June, neat rows of saplings stretched across the land adjacent to Olivia's property, their slender trunks supported by stakes against the mountain winds. It would be years before they bore significant fruit, but already Olivia could envision the orchard in maturity, branches heavy with apples, the sweet scent of ripening fruit in the air. One evening, as they walked among the newly planted trees checking irrigation channels, Vaughn stopped suddenly and turned to Olivia. "There's something I want to show you," he said, taking her hand. "A surprise I've been working on." He led her to a small rise at the edge of the orchard, where a grove of mature cottonwoods provided shade. There, partially hidden among the trees, stood a small structure, a gazebo of elegant design, its wooden lattice already twined with the beginnings of climbing roses. "Vaughn, it's beautiful," Olivia breathed, stepping inside to admire the craftsmanship. "Did you build this yourself?" "With some help from the town carpenter," he admitted. "I thought it would be a pleasant place to rest when working in the orchard, or to sit in the evenings and watch the sunset." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved her deeply. This wasn't a flashy gift designed to impress, but something created with care and consideration for her comfort and pleasure. "I love it," she said simply, reaching for his hand. They stood together as twilight deepened around them, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Olivia felt a profound sense of rightness, of having found her place in the world after months of drifting. "I love you," she said suddenly, the words rising from her heart with unstoppable force. "I wasn't looking for this for you when I came west, but you've become essential to my happiness." Vaughn's arms encircled her, strong and sure. "And you to mine. I love you, Olivia Bennett, more than I have words to express." Their kiss deepened, filled with promise and passion that had been carefully banked until this moment of mutual declaration. When they finally parted, Vaughn kept her close within the circle of his arms. "Marry me," he said softly. "Not immediately, whenever you're ready. But say you'll be my wife, my partner in everything." Olivia looked up at him, this man who had brought her back to life, who had shown her that new beginnings were possible even after devastating loss. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were wed in September, when the aspen leaves had turned to gold and the first experimental crop from the older fruit trees on Vaughn's ranch had been harvested. The ceremony took place in the gazebo, which had been decorated with late-blooming wildflowers and ribbons. The entire town attended, along with ranchers from the surrounding countryside and a few distinguished guests from Denver friends and business associates of Vaughn's family. Victoria Harrington stood as Olivia's matron of honor, while Mayor Patterson served as best man. Rebecca Prescott caught the bridal bouquet, blushing furiously when this caused several knowing glances to be exchanged. Her courtship with the young doctor who had recently established a practice in town was common knowledge. The celebration continued well into the evening, with dancing and feasting under lantern light in the orchard. When the last guests had departed, Vaughn led Olivia back to her house, their house now carrying her across the threshold in traditional fashion. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the parlor. "I've been home since I found this land," Olivia replied, reaching up to touch his face. "But now it's complete." In the years that followed, the orchard flourished beyond their most optimistic projections. By the 5th year, Blackwood Orchard's fruit was being shipped to Denver, Santa Fe, and as far as San Francisco, commanding premium prices for its quality and flavor. The school thrived as well, with Rebecca continuing as head teacher while Olivia served as administrator, developing curricula and securing resources. When a second schoolhouse became necessary due to the town's growth, Vaughn designed the building himself, incorporating the latest educational theories into its architecture. Their personal happiness was crowned in the 3rd year of their marriage with the birth of twins, a boy they named James Edward after both their fathers, and a girl called Margaret Victoria in honor of Vaughn's first wife and their dear friend, Mrs. Harrington. Watching Vaughn with their children, Olivia often reflected on the strange turns life could take. She had come west broken by grief, seeking solitude and independence. Instead, she had found community, purpose, and a love deeper and richer than she had ever imagined possible. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they sat together in the gazebo as dusk fell, the orchard stretching before them in orderly rows, heavy with ripening fruit. Their children played nearby under the watchful eye of their nanny, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if I hadn't placed that advertisement, or if you hadn't responded?" Vaughn asked, his arm around her shoulders. Olivia considered this. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some connections are meant to be." "The educated Easterner turns philosophical," he teased gently. "The Harvard man pretends surprise," she returned, smiling up at him. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness gathered and the children were taken inside for bed. Stars appeared one by one in the vast Colorado sky, bright and clear in a way they never were in the city. "I came west to start over," Olivia mused, "but what I really found was continuation, a new chapter rather than a new book. And are you satisfied with how this chapter is unfolding?" Vaughn asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice even after years of happiness together. Olivia turned in his arms to face him, seeing in his beloved features the same strength and gentleness that had drawn her from the beginning. "More than satisfied," she assured him. "I'm grateful for every word, every page, and eager for all that's yet to be written." Their kiss held the warmth of established love and the spark of continuing discovery, the perfect balance that they had built together in this place of new beginnings and second chances. As they walked hand in hand back to their home, Olivia felt the beating of her heart strong, steady, alive with purpose and joy. She had indeed started over in the West, but what she had found was so much more than a fresh beginning. She had found completion, fulfillment, and a love that had brought her heart back to life when she had thought it forever stilled. In the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon, its voice echoing across the valley wild and free, like the spirit of the West itself. Olivia squeezed Vaughn's hand, receiving an answering pressure that spoke of understanding without words. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, the orchard to tend, children to raise, a community to serve. But tonight was for gratitude, for acknowledging the journey that had brought them to this perfect moment of belonging. "I love you," she whispered as they reached their doorway. "And I love you," he replied, his voice carrying all the certainty of a man who had found his true home. Today, tomorrow, always. Inside, the lamps glowed golden in welcome, and outside the stars kept their ancient vigil over the orchard, the mountains, and the lives being lived with courage and love in this wild, beautiful land.